Chapter 2. Some 60 yards in front of the motel lay a wide and busy highway. As usual, it was covered with a constant stream of vehicles flowing on to nearby Kennedy Airport, outer Queens, and the bedroom communities of suburban Nassau County beyond the city limits. Expecting the worst of his fellow humans in everything, the man who enjoyed killing always drove defensively. Tonight he was especially wary as he guided the Volvo sedan onto the multi-lane expressway. Rush hour traffic surging from the great city's commercial center was building rapidly, and visibility was declining in the mounting snowfall. He had anticipated those conditions. He had factored both of them into his timetable. With windshield wipers flicking and clicking like twin metronomes, he drove 300 yards in the slow outer lane to the turnoff. After leaving the highway, he cruised right for 5 blocks into an area of tree-lined streets and 3-story private homes. There were a few neighborhood stores, one a small grocery named Arthur's. The telephone booth on the corner beside it was the reason he'd come here. Though he had seen no sign he was under surveillance, he certainly wasn't going to dial these numbers from the motel. That would be as stupid as making more than 2 calls from the same booth, a dangerous violation of the basic rules. He parked the Volvo and looked carefully in both directions. There were hardly any pedestrians in sight, and only an occasional car loomed through the fluttering snow. Entering the booth, he caressed the grenade in his pocket as if it were some magical totem or religious talisman. It was merely a habit. He certainly didn't believe in good luck or that primitive god rubbish. Still, for a moment, he felt a visceral surge of confidence and power. Then he pulled from his shirt pocket the slip of fast-burning flash paper on which he'd written the first 3 numbers. He'd memorized the other 3. He was the only member of the assault team who knew all of those. It was safer for the entire group that way. He took out a fistful of coins, studied the piece of paper, and dialed the first number. 202 936 1212. After a few seconds of preamble, he finally heard the words that he was waiting for. Another 2 inches in Washington by midnight as the new storm sweeps across the District of Columbia and into Maryland. He dialed again. 617 936 1234. Heavy fog continues to blanket Greater Boston. Driving conditions will remain hazardous until early morning. It was time to move on. Following his security rule against more than 2 calls from one phone, he got back into the Volvo and drove 9 blocks to the next booth on his list. 412 936 1212. At Pittsburgh Airport. Major thunderstorms are rolling through Allegheny County. Freezing sleet is following right behind them with 40-mile-an-hour winds. The outer perimeter was secure for at least 6 hours. That was more than he needed. The attack could proceed. Satisfaction gleamed in his left eye as he put more coins into the phone slot. Nothing showed in his right eye. It was artificial, a replacement for the one he'd lost in a 1981 shootout with French anti-terrorist police. He'd killed 3 of the leather-jacketed troopers before escaping into the Paris dawn. A month later, he cremated the woman who betrayed him. She had screamed for a long time in the burning car before the fuel tank exploded. He wasn't thinking about her as he dialed the first of the numbers that he'd memorized. Concentrating on tonight's operation, he was again scanning the street warily, peering through the snow for any sign of danger. He let the telephone ring 4 times, hung up and redialed the same number. It belonged to a payphone on the wall of a South Bronx garage. The man who picked it up was a stocky 28-year-old Latin. He had strong convictions and considerable experience with explosives. "Is Mr. Enrique Velez there?" "No, this is his cousin, Jose," the man in the garage replied. Challenge and countersign correct. The conversation immediately switched to Spanish, an exchange of short staccato phrases like bursts from an automatic weapon. After 20 seconds of curt communication, there was a brief silence while the mustachioed bomb expert studied his wristwatch. Then he adjusted it, carefully moving the larger hand forward 1 minute. "Bueno, adios," he said, and hung up the phone. He turned to make a thumbs-up gesture to another young Latin male leaning against a white minivan 10 yards away. Paco Garcia smiled back at his older brother. They had always been very close. That was a matter of official record in the files of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI had been interested in Juan and Paco Garcia for 5.5 years. Paco Garcia unlocked the rear door of the van and took out a pair of tan 26-inch Samsonite valises. They were heavy, and he set them down on the garage floor immediately. He opened his lips to call out the defiant slogan of the movement, but he stifled it. Their orders had been blunt and specific. They were to say nothing political, not even here. They were to assume they were under visual and electronic surveillance at all times. They couldn't even embrace, as they usually did before an operation. There might be a hidden camera. Paco Garcia shrugged, lifted one of the cases, and placed it on the front seat of a blue Ford. Juan Garcia deposited the other on the floor in the front compartment of a green Omni. Both cars had four-wheel drive and snow tires. The orders on that too had been precise and unequivocal, and one did not defy his commands. He was utterly vicious, Juan Garcia reflected soberly. For a moment, the husky Puerto Rican wondered about the others involved in this operation and what they were doing. They had never met. It felt unnatural to fight as part of an army of strangers, but there was no time to dwell on that now. Each of the brothers had almost an hour's drive to his target. The younger brother opened the garage door, and the two cars glided out into the night. The man who enjoyed killing was already on his way to the third telephone booth. He had to follow the rules. Taking chances would be stupid. Pausing at a red traffic light, he recalled a Russian proverb. All the brave men are in prison. The Russians were wrong. Those men were dead. The litany of US Air Force test pilots had much more truth. There are old men and bold men, but no old, bold men. After searching several minutes for a parking space, he found one. Then he walked back 3 blocks to the booth to make the next call. 4 rings, hang up, dial again. Now he was speaking to a swarthy man in the Atlantic Avenue section of Brooklyn, where so many immigrants from the Middle East lived. They talked in Arabic, a tongue the man in the telephone booth had learned when he'd been an instructor at a covert warfare training camp in Marxist South Yemen. The man he was speaking to had been one of his best students. The brief and guttural conversation ended with another synchronizing of watches. The last of this group of calls was to a small warehouse in Queens, some 2 miles from the snow-swept phone booth. It was an earnest, bespectacled Japanese in coveralls who answered. He was seated on a swivel chair in front of 2 large metal racks. The 3 shelves on each were crammed with sophisticated radio equipment and electrical gear. There were also 6 television sets. He was a small man with a large anger. Takeshi Ito, 5 feet 4 inches tall and a week from his 31st birthday, was an electronics expert on loan from the fanatical Japanese Red Army. His technical skills were crucial to the success of this operation. "I'm calling to remind you about the party tonight. It starts at 8. "No problem," Ito replied. "Good. Damn it, my watch has stopped. What time have you got?" Ito looked at the electric clocks on the rack. One ran on wall current and the other was battery-powered. Trained as an electrical engineer, he believed in backup systems for everything. He watched the sweep second hand move. "It is 5:41, straight up," he said. "Thanks. See you later. Don't be late." "I never am," Ito answered truthfully. When he heard the click and the dial tone, Ito put down the phone to glance at the video screens. They were as important to his survival as the 9mm submachine gun on the ammunition box at his feet. Connected to television cameras mounted high on the exterior of the warehouse, they provided continuous surveillance of the street out front and the rear alley. He studied the screens for half a minute, squinting to see through the falling snow. Everything seemed quiet and normal outside. The man who had telephoned Ito felt exuberant as he walked back to the parked Volvo. The operation was moving forward. Nothing could stop it now. In 2 hours and 19 minutes, war would come to the United States. It would be both a shock and a lesson to the complacent Americans. They hadn't endured a war in their homeland for more than a century. Their wives and children had felt safe behind 2 oceans for a long time, a dozen decades. That would end tonight. They would learn the meaning of fear. All the other major powers, Britain, Russia, China, France, Germany, Japan, India, and Italy, had been bombed and battered in bloody battle. Now it was America's turn, he exulted silently. He patted the grenade in celebration. The plan was perfect. The equipment was excellent. The hand-picked personnel he'd assembled were ideal for this unique assault. He hadn't told any of them what the real goal was, or who was paying for this extraordinary operation. All they knew was that they were liberating political prisoners, and that each member of the attack group would receive $1 million. That part of what he told them was true. Most of the rest was a lie, but that didn't matter. They'd collect the $1 million each and disperse to deliver the money to their various organizations to fund their own future operations. He'd get a lot more. $5 million. He deserved it. He had conceived the plan and how to camouflage the real objective. That deception was extremely important to the enormously rich and famous man who was investing some $11 million in tonight's attack. That sum did not bother him. The only thing that counted was that the objective be achieved, and in a way that did not point to him. In his own field, the man who would get the $5 million was also prominent. Britain's MI5, France's SDECE and Police Nationale, the American FBI and CIA, West Germany's internal security apparatus, Israel's Shin Bet and Mossad, a dozen other intelligence organizations, and millions of newspaper readers and television viewers around the world were aware of his violent activities. The middle son of a leftist German magazine editor and a plump Austrian schoolteacher had come a long way since he was expelled from Ludwig Maximilians Universität in Munich for political hooliganism. He wasn't just another ranting revolutionary student anymore, he reflected as he saw his car up ahead. Even though he wasn't a sports, television, or music star, he'd killed enough people to make the media take him seriously. He was one of the most notorious terrorists alive. He was feared and wanted in many lands. He was Willi Staub.